No, I know, but like similar.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor,
It's been like a week and a half.
you're on air now, you know. Everything you just said is going over the air. I know, but he doesn't know that, and he's still talking. Mr. Mayor, come on, Mayor.
Excuse me?
It's time.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
I have a clock.
It's time when the
But I
mayor
tell by
says
the one
it's
back
time.
there on my machine. Oh, not that thing. No, the meeting is live and streaming. Thank you.
All right, let's call to order this wonderful meeting of
Never
the...
done that before.
What?
You've never done it.
I've done it every time. Not like that. Good evening and welcome. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Nevada City Council to order. Today is Wednesday, September 14th, 2022, and it is 6:50 p.m. exactly. Mr. City Clerk, would you kindly come up here and share some wisdom with us?
No, you have to open the meeting.
Oh, well, I just did, didn't I?
No, you have to do all the rest of the flag,
Oh,
I think.
okay.
Up to you.
Do I-
We can certainly do that. You
I
can
would
do it
like,
in public comment.
would-
Either way.
why don't you come on up now, just since we're ready and I'm...
Just walk up to the microphone and talk.
Yeah,
Something new. I love new.
yeah.
Being
well,
as old as I am, I like it new.
just trying to keep you on your toes.
What is going on tonight? Pull it together.
We're gonna be sloppy again, you know, once this is...
Did she say Gru? Like
Crew.
What kind of crew?
Minions.
Cruella?
Mr. City Clerk,
Thank you.
please.
I've changed my whole format this afternoon because I realized it was Constitution weekend. So good evening and welcome to Neil's Knickknacks. Being Constitution weekend, I, several years ago, played President Madison. That's the reason for the hat, because this was the hat of the era for the summer. It was so funny because I found out Madison was the shortest president we've ever had. He was 5'4", but I couldn't shrink for that. And I also understood that he was the first president to wear pants in office.
Versus,
Before that, there was breeches.
got it.
Fancy pants.
Yeah. And he was also known as the father of the Constitution. Now, I've been down in the bomb shelter, which the city has, for the people that don't realize it. And I found items from the centennial of 1987. There was a commemorative coin from our own Nevada City Mint, where Harmony Books is now. And Don Schmidt was very good at minting. And I found out from him, and we have some in City Hall somewhere hidden away, that the newer the number on the coin, the better it is, has better value in the future. So somewhere in City Hall, we have number 1 through 7 in sterling of the coin he made for the Constitution Day.
Wow.
And he's still in business. His company is still in business. It's over in Grass Valley because he outgrew the mint here. And he also could go use the Nevada City Mint to do their commemorative coins for their state parks. And he did all those here. God, I've done all that already. So down there, I was going through a lot of boxes and found an old program that mentioned that we had a flag that had flown over the Capitol building. And I've finally found it. I found a bag down there with 2 American flags in it in triangular fold. One was old and probably will be put downstairs in that container. The other was virtually brand new. And then I found this one.
Whoa. This is original Betsy Ross.
Yeah, it is the Betsy Ross flag, and I have no idea who made it.
Looks like Betsy
I
Ross.
I can't find anything on it as
knitted.
formal.
It is knit.
It is knit. And whoever did it, it was made in the USA.
There you go.
So if anybody knows anything about it, call the city. So now, that was the Nick, now the Knacks. Hong Kong is testing a new pedestrian signals that bathe the ground in red or green light. Why? So people don't have to look up from their phones.
Oh,
On this day in 1897, Thomas Edison received a patent for Klinograph, a movie camera that used celluloid film. A dessert called Clair de Lune was invented by the White House State Dinner honoring the astronauts of Apollo 11. It looks like a glorified baked Alaska, but it sounds better than that. Man paddled 38 miles in a hollowed-out pumpkin to beat the 2016 record of 25.5 miles. The photos on social media show Hansen crouch inside the giant squash, which weighed 846 pounds. Officials said Hansen set off down the Missouri River around 7:30 a.m. and completed his journey just after 6:30. This was a new one I've never heard of. The Tamagotchi is a handheld digital pet that was created in Japan, and it was released by Bandai in 1996, in the USA in 1997. It became one of the biggest toy fads of the late 1990s and the early 2000s. A 24-year-old Belgian teacher has become one of the world's most successful Tamagotchi breeders. He has successfully procreated 65 generations in a row. I had to look it up. It's a funny-looking thing. Popcorn has long been associated with the movies, or in recent years, the microwave. But although many of us may have wondered why popcorn pops, few of us have asked where popcorn actually comes from, or came from. The indigenous people of America first domesticated the strain of corn which produces popcorn thousands of years ago. Europeans learned about popcorn from the natives. When Cortez invaded Mexico and when Columbus arrived in the West Indies, each saw natives eating popcorn, as well as using it in necklaces and headdresses. In fact, popcorn artifacts dating back to 6,700 years ago were discovered in Peru. So the next time you grab a handful of your favorite snack, remember, it's not just Orville Rittenbecker you should be thinking. And tomorrow night's my night for popcorn, apples and cheese. And also down, I found the Etiquette on the Stars and Stripes, which every member has. See, they're waving. And there's more over on the side. And this was found in the bomb shelter also. And I brought them up because of the idiots that drive down on their funny pickups, dragging the American flag in the soil, wearing it like a piece of garment. I hope some of them, I'm not sure, but I hope some of them will read this and understand it. I served in the military when that, pardon me, when that group came through, I was totally insulted by their ignorance about our flag. Thank you.
thank you, Neil. I think anybody who served in the military understands flag etiquette, and so I realize that a lot of those folks probably haven't served.
A lot of them have.
There's that too. All right, thank you. All right, the Nissan Driveway Commission, I'm going to read this today. This is our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the Nissan people are still here among us today, though they are nearly invisible, and their story continues to be excluded from history. We understand we are on Nisenan land that was never ceded, and the original tribal families have yet to recover from the near genocide of their people. As a resident or a visitor in Nisenan land, we support the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe in efforts to stabilize their people, as well as the campaign to restore tribal sovereignty through federal recognition. I think everybody can hear me. All right. Could everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have wonderful Amy helping us today. Could you read the roll, Amy?
Councilmember Cece.
Here.
Councilmember Klein.
Here?
Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hernandez.
Here.
And Mayor Fleming.
Here.
All are present.
I would like to note that Russ Hildebrand from the City Attorney's Office is joining us by Zoom this evening. Thanks, Russ. And that our Deputy City Clerk, Gabby, is in training, so our City Planner, Amy, is here.
Here is, Russ can't hear.
Oh. Can you hear us now?
Is there something
Can you hear us now? Yeah, we got a smile. All right.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Russ. Sorry about that. So Amy's having the Zoom, and the city manager will be conducting roll call and taking the minutes. We got a little movement of the personnel right now. All right.
How valuable Gabby is.
Yes, yeah, it takes two people to fill her position.
Well, Amy's awesome too, but
Well, Amy is
Me, not so
way
much.
awesome. Yeah, you need that extra help there. All right. Now's the time for any agenda modifications. Anybody like to make a change to the agenda, pull consent items, or do we have any recusals or anything like that? I think we might have somebody wanting to pull some.
Yeah, I'd like to pull item number 3 off the consent agenda, the police activity report.
Okay.
I just feel like there needs to be some clarification on that.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? All right. So we are going to pull 3 and then approve the rest of the consent agenda as is, and we can note that in the motion.
Mayor Fleming, I did want to make a comment on 8. I don't want to pull it.
Okay. Should you do that now or after?
you can just make the comment when you're considering the consent calendar.
Okay, all right. So now we're just going to adopt the regular agenda. Council, I just did that. All right, Lou would like to comment on fire safety. So I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda with the modifications as addressed.
Oh, thank you. And a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a first by Gary and a second by Lou. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, passes 5-0. Today, we have some great presentations and proclamations. A proclamation for the grand opening and the ribbon cutting of Communal Cafe. Yay! Woo! All right, the Communal Cafe is open for business at 233 Broad Street and is under new name and ownership. It continues the long tradition of a coffee shop presence at the location in the historic downtown. Thalia Harris is the owner and owners group representative of Communal Cafe, and she shared that a group of entrepreneurs that came together in a community they want to improve and be part of, and that Communal Cafe is dedicated to supporting the businesses by using farm-fresh ingredients from local farms and retaining different makers of arts and goods. The grand opening and ribbon-cutting ceremony will be held at Communal Cafe on September 16th this year. At what time?
5.
At 5 p.m. The end of proclamation says, "Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Nevada City does hereby honor the opening of Communal Cafe and urges those who visit, live, work, play, and anything else in Nevada City to eat local by patronizing Communal Cafe and all of our Nevada City businesses, or by attending the grand opening ribbon cutting ceremony on September 16th, 2022 at 5 p.m.
Yes.
All right, Thalia, would you like to say a few words?
Just thank you guys for all your support, and I know you guys are all rooting for us, and I can feel it, so thank you.
How's it been going? Has it,
So far, so good, yeah.
from what I see, it looks great.
Yeah, we've been really busy. It's a huge space to fill, so just keeping, extending our offerings. So we're getting our beer and wine license, more food, so more stuff to look forward to for everyone.
Yeah.
You
well,
filled it beautifully.
Thank
It's
you,
very
yeah.
warm, and it's the most life I've seen in there in a long time.
Thank you so much. Means a lot. Yeah, we've been getting a lot of good feedback, and that's why we're doing it. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you in our city.
Thanks,
Will you
Thalia.
introduce your dog?
I'll nourish this dog. This is Ruby. She's the mascot.
The communal mascot.
Yes, thank you
Cute.
guys.
Oh, thank
Thanks,
you.
Thalia.
Oh, and I'm going to sign this and hand this to you. Would you? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, and not to be overshadowed, we have a proclamation honoring the grand open ribbon cutting of the new incarnation of Fur Traders with Randy Ericko. All right, well, Fur Traders is open for business at 303 Broad Street and is under new ownership. It continues the 44-year tradition of the shop's presence at the location in historic downtown. Wendy Ermishaw is the owner and proprietor of Fur Traders, and she shared, "As a native of Nevada County, I appreciate the unique value that Fur Traders has brought to our historical district and beyond for decades. It is on my heart to serve our community and visitors with quality, comfort, style, and fellowship through commerce." I love that. I love that. The grand opening and ribbon cutting ceremony will be held at Fur Traders on September 19th, 2022 at 4 p.m. Be there, or be somewhere else, but you should be there. The end of proclamation says, "Now therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Nevada City does hereby honor the opening of Fur Traders and urges those who patronize, live, visit, work, and play in Nevada City to shop local by patronizing the Fur Trader and all of our other Nevada City businesses, or, I would say, by attending the grand opening and ribbon cutting ceremony on September 19th at 4 p.m. Wendy,
Yes, thank
how's it
you.
been?
Yeah, thank you. It's been absolutely a labor of love. It's been incredible to retain some of the original staff members and, work with their expertise and familiarity with our customer base. And then also evolve a bit in trying to stay even more relevant to our ever-growing, ever-changing population and, trends and fads and so forth. So, I invite you all to come in just to be social, hang out. We've got a nice couch in there. Yeah, very cozy. Smells like leather. That's the first thing everyone says, is it smells good. So, and it's a work in progress. So we're transitioning right now from spring until fall. We actually have a great sale going on. And the reception from the community and visitors alike has been overwhelmingly positive. So for folks who've never been in the store, I literally hear every day, "Wow, this is a beautiful store, thanks to that gorgeous old building." I think that's really what does it. But then for people who have shopped there for really generations, I don't think I've heard a single person say they wish it was the old way. And so that's really validating about some of the changes we've made to be a little more accessible and still have those unique categories, but merchandise them in a way that makes it a little more self-serviceable and warm. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. And here we have a wonderful official written version of the proclamation. Okay, and do we have somebody from Poshmosh? Oh, there is she. Hi,
And some cute little kid.
and the boss. And the boss. Okay. Shannon is here. So next is a proclamation honoring the grand opening and ribbon cutting of Mosh Posh Marketplace.
Yeah.
Yay. It's a mouthful, but that's good for marketing. Mosh Posh Marketplace is open for business at 110 York Street and is a new business, but continues the long tradition of a kitchen and a retail presence at the location in historic downtown. Shannon Bird is the owner of Mosh Posh Marketplace, and she shared that Mosh Posh Marketplace began during the pandemic to fulfill a need for a commissary kitchen within the county, and that they offer local and sustainable products and love to support small businesses within the community. A grand open and ribbon cutting ceremony will be held at Mosh Posh Marketplace on September 15th, 2022 at 4 p.m. Yeah, tomorrow. We'll be there. The end of the proclamation says, "Now, therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Nevada City does hereby honor the opening of Mosh Posh Marketplace and urges those who visit, eat, live, work, play in Nevada City to eat and shop local by patronizing Mosh Posh Marketplace and all of our Nevada City businesses, or by attending the grand opening and ribbon cutting ceremony on September 15th, 2022 at 4 p.m. Take it away, Shannon. Tell us things.
I appreciate you working with all those M's. Sorry, Mosh Posh Market. We're just excited to continue on the concept of supporting the community and small food businesses. We have several new vendors coming on board that are offering culturally based offerings, so that's been really fun. Just always learning about new small businesses and adding to our offerings. So we're just excited to be there. We're gonna do lunches and late nights and to-go model based. So
Nice.
yeah, we're really excited.
That's so great. And you know, I love that your business supports other businesses. It's just a symbiotic relationship that we need to do more of. So thank you for that.
Sustainability and just coming together as small businesses, important, so,
You're doing the
Excited.
right stuff in our wonderful city. So thank you so much.
thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Suitable for framing, you can, email it to your friends. Okay.
4 years now.
All right, so we got everybody done there, that's great. All right, so we've done all that. All right, we're here. All right, presentations, we did that, public comment. All right, now is the time. Government Code Section 54954.3 provides that any member of the public may address the city council on any matter not on the agenda that was in the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. The Brown Act, with limited exceptions, does not allow the council or staff to discuss issues brought forth under public comment. The council cannot take action on non-agendized items. Concern may be referred to staff or placed on a future agenda. Please note that comments from the public will also be taken on each agenda item at the time it is heard. So, do we have any public comment in the room today? All right, come on up. Tell us your name.
I'm Paul Carner.
Hi, Paul.
I'm the local street minister.
Oh, nice to meet
There are some homeless people who have had their driver's license taken away, and they're deep in debt due to this camping ordinance that y'all had put in place. Now, there was a Right to Rest Act written by the legislature that made your law unconstitutional in 2015, I think it was.
Boise decision?
No.
Okay.
It was written by the California State Legislature. You can look it up online at the California State Legislature's website. And it'd be a wise move. It really would. Because you see, when it was written, they assumed that the district attorney's office would not prosecute people when they were arrested on this unconstitutional law. They were arrested, they were prosecuted, they lost their license, and they've spent years without it. That is a big, big burden. They need their license back. Now, is there any way the city will get their license back for them, or is this something I'm going to have to take to court, Placer County? I'm just questioning, because they need their license back. Is there any way? Nobody's going to answer? Is there any way we can talk about this?
So I
You
would.
haven't looked at the law yet, have you?
So I would.
You know the law. Are you the council? Who's council? Is there council? Do you know the law, sir?
So I'm sorry, sir, we can't have
Apparently.
like this back and forth dialogue with you. I would suggest that you make an appointment with staff.
There is
and-
no back and, okay, well, all right,
You can
fine.
talk.
I tell you what I'll do. I'm going to go file in Placer County, and I'll lay 10-to-1 odds I will win
In
guarantee
Placer
it.
County?
Mhm.
Okay.
against you. And after that happens, then I will file for all the others.
Do you know that
And
we're
then-
we're Nevada County?
Then, yes. You don't know the law, do you, sir?
I'm
You're
a
gonna
lawyer,
learn.
so but I don't know the law. Thank you. Okay. I didn't mean to offend. Hello, sir. Hi, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Douglas Bianchi. I live at 124 Boulder Street, and I'd like to talk about Measure W. I think it's important that the subject is discussed in this forum by this council. And it's a complex issue, and a little time remains to consider it. If the measure fails, we can all take a deep breath and look at the issues at leisure. If it passes, legal action is likely to be taken against the city of Nevada City by the state of California. What portion of the city's resources are we prepared to expend in defense? This is a time when we need wise leadership from Nevada City Council in order to dispel fear, misinformation, and perhaps misplaced nostalgia. I ask the council to lead by making their views known individually and as a body with a formal recommendation to the voters. You cannot and you must not try to hand this over to staff and lawyers. This is policy. This is your job. It's not an easy one, and I thank you all for taking responsibility for it.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Is there any other additional public comment in the room? And if not, Amy, could you check online to see if we have any folks waiting?
Yes. But if anyone is watching this broadcast via Zoom and would like to make a comment on anything not on the agenda, please raise your virtual hand.
Raise your virtual hand, I like that.
No, not seen any.
Okay. All right, so we're going to adopt the consent agenda. We've already adopted that, sort of, but we're going to do all items
May
on
I-
the consent. I'm sorry.
May I make my comment?
Oh, yeah, well, let me read
Sure.
this little part, and then you can make your comment, and then we'll talk about number 3? Okay, all right, so all items under the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. We can, so now I think it's appropriate for you, Mr. Ceci, to give your comments.
Thank you. Before we vote on the consent agenda, I'd like to comment on item 8, which is the appointment of the members of the Fire Safety Advisory Committee. I'd like to thank all those people who volunteered to serve on the committee. We had more applicants than positions available, which says good things about our community's commitment to fire safety. We were also restricted by ordinance to appoint only those people who live within the boundaries of Nevada City itself. So although we had some good people from outside the boundaries apply, we could not actually appoint them. In addition to the members the council will appoint tonight, all of whom I highly recommend, the committee has benefited from the expertise and work of several people who are participating but non-voting members. I would like to thank those past participants, Terry Anderson and Annette Seabury, and those who will continue working with the committee going forward, especially Kai Pratchner and Nancy Weber and our facilitator, Pete Williams. And those people, I think, deserve acknowledgement and recognition, and I thank them.
Thank you, Lou. And Daniela, would you like to talk about number 8? Oh, no.
3.
Number 3, sorry.
Yeah, just.
I think it would be best if you just handle the consent calendar, a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar, and then we'll take number 3 as a separate action with the presentation from the
Okay.
police chief.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the,
I move that we approve the consent agenda with the removal of item number 3.
I second.
first by Daniela, a second by Adam, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or opposition? No. Passes 5-0. And now, I think is the time. for
Yeah,
us to talk.
I want to invite our new Chief Foss up to speak on item 3. Just with the amount of work that Gary and I have done over the last year, year and a half, on reimagining policing in Nevada City and engaging community around policing in Nevada City. I think it's important that changes don't always just go through consent, that the transparency is not just on paper, but is spoken aloud. And I'm excited about the changes you're making, so I would love to hear more about the numbers on the police report this month.
Yeah, of course, and thank you for pulling this, actually, because it's always better, I think, just like you said, that we communicate this in the open and everybody knows what's happening and what's occurring. So, Mayor, members of council, what you guys saw on the police report activity for the month, normally, I believe the tradition has been just a stat-based form, and it would kind of give you just an oversight. I want to expand upon that as much as possible, so I did give a little narrative on this one. Hopefully, we increase that to maybe even this each time. There is some numbers in here that if we weren't going to have this discussion, could be somewhat alarming, but I don't want you to be alarmed. This is actually one of those trust the process, so let me explain what the process is a little bit here. We have 4 categories that went up. It shows statistically 500%. And what those are is general reports, graffiti, miscellaneous info reports, and vandalism. So why have they gone up so much? Are we seeing a crime wave? Absolutely not. How those were traditionally handled is what would be called SBO, or settled by officer. So the officer would go out, it would be a minor vandalism. They would contact usually Public Works or sometimes the property owner and make sure that it's removed, but there was no real evidence to go upon, so there wasn't a report being documented of that. Now we have changed direction on that. We are going to be documenting all cases because that's going to help us to catch the perpetrator later, to actually give better and more realistic statistics to show what we need to do to tackle the situations that are actually out there in our community. If we're not seeing them and we're not documenting them, then we don't know exactly what we're having in the community. So all those reports you're seeing, a general report is, it just doesn't have quite the crime that's going to fall into a specific report. You're going to see a lot of those because as we see things like somebody's tearing up trash and throwing it into the roadway, again, those are not going to be just settled by officer. I want a report made on those. And the officers are making reports on that, which I'm very proud of, and is the direction we need to go. But those are going to be in the general report category. Graffiti we spoke about, miscellaneous info report is very similar to the general report, but sometimes those can be crime-based. Vandalism is, you're going to see a massive increase on this because I'm telling most of the store owners to contact us if somebody comes by and pulls their flowers out of the flower pot, for example, in front of the store. That's something that before they probably wouldn't call law enforcement on. I'm encouraging them to do so now. That is an impact to our community. That does need to be addressed by us. We do need to know what's occurring and try to find the people that's causing it and potentially solve it. So you're going to see a lot of these numbers go up. The warrants for both felony and misdemeanor warrant arrest did go up a lot. That is, I'm hoping to continue that trend. I'm really pushing for the officers to be patrolling and proactive as much as possible. When they are doing that, we will see an increase in warrant arrests. What you will see a decrease in, hopefully this continues, is you'll see our hit and runs did go down. And that is, again, a signal of our officers just being more on the street. A lot of that has to do with our staffing. Our staffing has increased dramatically over the last year, which is very helpful for some of these numbers to go up. This is going to continue. If you like the direction we're going, you'll see this in even more categories because this is not even really a full month that we've been seeing this, and we're going to expand upon this even more. So don't be alarmed. Always ask questions. I think this is great that we come up here and talk about it. For example, we're right now in the information phase of smoking downtown. That's going to transition into the enforcement phase of smoking downtown. Those tickets are going to go up, and if we're not talking about it, it looks like we're seeing a massive increase of smoking downtown, when realistically we're just seeing an increase in enforcement of smoking downtown. So hopefully that explains it, of what we're talking about. And if you have any questions, I'd happily answer them now.
How long do you think it'll be before we see a decrease?
In which part? That smoking?
Well, smoking, yes.
So that's really tough to say. I think traditionally it happens much faster than we think. And we're going to target a specific time is my initial wave, I would say. So up to when most of the businesses are open, 5, 6 p.m., that's when we're really going to be focusing on, hey, there's no smoking in the downtown. We know that there's no time limit on the smoking downtown. It's not legal at any point in time, but I'm going to take this in chunks. And I think the most important chunk is the daytime hours. I would say that you're going to see an increase. We're going to be partnering with Public Works to get some more visible signs. We're talking to the store owners and saying, hey, this isn't something we want to ignore, so call us. We're even potentially looking at having people have information where go off and smoke. If they're going to smoke, they're going to smoke. But if they go smoking somewhere that it's not downtown, then it's going to be a lot better for our community, or get in their car and drive somewhere where they can take a smoke break. I think we're going to see improvements in it within a month and a half, 2 months. We haven't even started the like social media campaign wars. A lot of that, when it starts getting shared with the community, when people know that, okay, most people want to follow the rules. And if they just don't know it's against the rule, then, or if it's not being enforced, then they just don't follow. They just think, oh, it's not a big deal. Once they see it's being enforced, most people do comply and they want to follow the rules. So I think we'll see, are we going to get 100%? No. So if in 6 months you say, Dan, I saw somebody smoking, there's going to be some every now and then, but I think we can drastically increase it very quickly. Or drastically improve it, not increase it, wrong word. Drastically
I will
improve
be
it.
so impressed if it happens in a month or a month and a half. I just think that it's like shifting culture, right?
It is.
And I feel like, I mean, I'm stoked on a month or a month and a half, but I feel like we have so many visitors, and just like getting the word out to people who not just live here, but visitors, it's going to be a fun challenge.
We'll
I'm
see.
excited for it.
If it's not a month and a half, we're not going to give up. So if it
Right.
takes longer, it'll take longer, but I'm here for the long run, and so is a lot of my officers.
Just trying to give you a little cushion.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you. Let me change that to 6 months. In 6 months, it's gonna
Great.
be-
6 months sounds great.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. I'm really personally glad to see this, huge fan of Drucker, that which gets measured gets managed. And data is critical in this, with the understanding that it will take some time to gather data so that we can identify trends and the changes. But I think capturing the smaller details is important for understanding what crime really does look like in Nevada City. And if you don't measure it, you don't manage it. And, I'd like to think that Miriam is sitting at home applauding you. It's probably not true, but you'll make her very happy with your efforts to cease smoking in downtown.
Thank you, Gary. Adam, would you? Nothing? You're not a smoker? No. Okay, all right. Can I just anecdotally, cannabis versus tobacco, do you see a lot more of one or the other? Is it hard to say, or?
So just anecdotally with the eye test right now, I'm seeing more tobacco, definitely. I'm smelling the marijuana to some degree, but I don't see it so much. I think there still is that stigma of most people when they smoke marijuana, they want to go to an area where it's a little more secluded and private. I smell it downtown, definitely. I don't see it as much as tobacco. The tobacco, I think, is just, I do see much more frequently. Now, we will be enforcing both, but I do see tobacco far more often than I see the marijuana, from what I can tell with the...
Yeah.
Vaping is covered as well?
It is, yes. Right? Yes, it is. I had to read the ordinance and think of the ordinance again for a minute.
Yeah.
It's all smoking.
I noticed that when we were at a conference and they added the vaping, prohibition to the rules of the room, that used to just say smoking, now they've added vaping, so that's now a thing that's getting paid attention to. So I appreciate the efforts. It's really wonderful to see, and it will make a lot of people happy. I know that. And it'll make people feel safer and more healthy. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chief.
So
All right.
since we pulled it, public comment and then and vote on the item would be appropriate.
Okay, so is there any public comment in the room on this item? If not, Amy, could you check online?
Yes, if anyone out there in virtual land would like to comment on item number 3 on the consent calendar, please raise your virtual hand. Not seeing anyone.
Okay, then I'm looking for a motion to approve this item.
I move to approve item 3.
Second.
All right, we have a first by Lou and a second by Daniela. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Any abstention? Passes 5-1. Oh, 5-0, I'm sorry. My math skills.
council member.
It's my little. Okay, so now is the time for our public hearing, which are the items at hand. And the first item on the agenda is to conduct a public hearing in consideration of ordinance number 2022-10, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Nevada City, of the State of California, adding Chapter 12.05 to the Nevada City Municipal Code, establishing an encroachment permit process for allowing outdoor dining operations within the city right-of-way, including sidewalks and parklet dining. And consideration of resolution number 2022-59, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Nevada City, California, amending the fiscal year 2022-2023 citywide master fee schedule to include leasing and permitting fees associated with outdoor dining encroachment permits. This is going to be a presentation by our wonderful city manager, Sean Grayson. Sean, take it away.
Well, I will start it and end it, but the most important parts will come from Amy just in a little bit here. So in April, you approved a final extension to our temporary outdoor dining permits that were largely related to the need of COVID. You also, in that action, allowed me to move forward with staff on creating an ordinance that may allow these type of activities outside of COVID. I would note that this ordinance is under streets and sidewalks, which is Chapter 12 in our municipal code, and so the authority is the city engineer. That's why it's an encroachment permit, just like any other encroachment permit that we would do, because these have to do with the sidewalks and the streets. That's different than our zoning or subdivision ordinances, which are 17 and 16, Chapter 17 and 16, where the authority is either the planner or the planning commission or ultimately potentially the city council. So it reads a little bit different probably than what you're used to, but ultimately this is not required. And even if you adopted this evening and we do second reading and it goes into effect, the permits are discretionary. They're not a right. That's very different than something that would happen on the zoning side of things where something could be entitled by right. They have the ability to do that because it's their land, not the city's land. So we did put a lot of effort into making this as friendly as possible, but also ensuring that we're compliant with ADA standards, other relevant city regulations and codes. That being said, cities have been all over the map with what they have done with outdoor dining. Everything from doing what you're doing tonight to doing a scaled, or what you're looking at tonight, to doing a scaled version of it, a trial of 2 or 3 locations to see how it goes. And then there are many sites that have eliminated it, some that eliminated it right after the temporary, and some that allowed permanent parklets that are now reconsidering it. So it's certainly within the council's purview to decide what's right for Nevada City this evening, and it certainly does not have to be what we have written down for you. I would say that this is based on industry best practices and with input through the Planning Commission's workshops and the community and the business community. That being said, we're definitely open to any input you have this evening. So Amy will give you the presentation tonight, and then I'll close it out with the comments on the fee structure and the basis for that. So, Madam
right.
City Planner.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
So the Planning Commission did hold a public workshop on June 14th, 2022, for which participation helped inform the drafting of the ordinance. The draft was reviewed by the commission at a special Planning Commission meeting held August 4th, 2022. The commission requested several changes that primarily resulted in clarification and easing of some restrictions. 2 notable requests did not make it into the final draft before you. One was a request to allow tent structures, and a second was a request to reduce the clear sidewalk width to 4 feet. Tent structures are essentially just not permitted under California Building Code. The clear walkway space was essentially, so in the ordinance is written so that it has to maintain 4.5 feet. We essentially had merchants wanting 4 feet and Freed and those looking out for accessibility wanting 5 feet. So we sort of split the baby there.
Nice.
The proposed ordinance provides a regulatory process for the permitting of sidewalk dining and parklet dining. It is a modification of Title 12, as City Manager said, which is the Streets, Sidewalks, and Public Places chapter. for which the city engineer is the authorizing agent for permitting. As written, the city engineer may request that the planning commission act as a review body for parklet proposals before taking action. Both parklet and sidewalk dining would require an encroachment permit to be issued by the city engineer. Sidewalk dining will require permittees to select portable furniture based on outdoor dining furniture design guidelines, and it's intended to be a relatively simple process, and those design guidelines are attached to your staff reports. Parklet permittees at the discretion of the city engineer may go before the planning commission to obtain recommendations regarding aesthetics to ensure compatibility with the surrounding buildings. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Sean to talk about the fee structures set up for these.
Hello, Melissa. Good timing. So staff is recommending a fee schedule for encroachment applications, renewal applications, and for annual lease of public spaces. So the application and renewal fees are intended to cover the direct costs associated with staff time to permit, review, and inspect. And that does include also the planning commission time where required. The proposed fee structure is broken out, but it's only a couple of lines, so I'll say that the parklet dining encroachment permit is $1,500. That's largely because it is a process that would go through the planning commission, and that takes time and public noticing and a variety of other things. Sidewalk dining encroachment permit is $300, which is really includes both the permit fee of $220 and a one-year lease amount of $80 for the value of the table space they're taking up on the sidewalk, which is a very small amount for the total of $300. The parklet lease amount is $316 a month, or $3,000 if paid in a lump sum. Simply, the city has less cost in processing if we don't have to take 12 checks. Instead, we take one, so there is a way to get a discount there. And then sidewalk dining encroachment renewal is the same as the initial at $300. Parklet dining encroachment renewal is $220 because it doesn't have to go back through the planning commission, but they will still have to pay the annual lease fee of that $3,000 or $316 a month. Just to give a basis for that, the parklet lease fee is for 2 parking spots, maximum 2 parking spots. The city has a revenue loss, a maximum revenue loss, I think it's $2,496, which represents our 9 to 5 meters Monday through Saturday, 52 weeks a year, excluding holidays. However, on the streets that this could be applied on, in practical terms, we get about 80% of that, so that's $2,000. That's the loss of revenue to the city that needs to be overcome at a minimum. The use of the space is $900 annually. The basis for that is this: in a separate ordinance, the city has a parking take fee. So if you were going to do a project that eliminated a private parking spot that was required for your project, we would charge you $4,500. I would note that while that seems high, it's exceedingly low compared to other cities. Nonetheless, that is what is on the books. So if you 2 parking spots would be $9,000. We wouldn't have them pay for that parking spot every year. This is basically amortized over an assumed 10-year period that they would be paying, 1/10 of the cost of that parking spot. So that gives you an additional $900 a year. And then the use of space. So essentially, like, we lease buildings that the city owns, like, for example, Harmony Books next door to the Chamber of Commerce. The lease amount would be $900 a year. That's basically based on a $2.50 per square foot charge for the space of the 2 parking spots. And while that sounds exceedingly cheap, they're not leasing a building, they're leasing, asphalted road, so that it's not an incredibly valuable asset from a monetary standpoint, although it is an incredibly valuable asset from a parking standpoint, because you cannot park in a parklet despite its name. The total parklet fee, if paid, equates to a commercial lease rate total all-in for everything of $1.39 per square foot per month. And that discount, if paid in full in a lump sum, takes it lower than that. We have worked hard to make this as affordable as possible, but we certainly have to meet an obligation to the council, to the taxpayers, because it is the taxpayers' property, as well as to the other businesses that cannot use the parklets but will lose parking. Properties with current temporary outdoor dining permits that apply for a parklet encroachment permit or a conditional use permit if they're on private property. Examples of that would be Three Forks, Golden Era. We intend to, with the council's permission, give them 90 days to work through the approval process. It just doesn't feel right to, say, tear it all out and and then rebuild it back. And, you know, it's just, we want to have a logical transition there. So that is the basis of the renewals, the exemption, and the fees. And with that, staff recommends that you conduct the public hearing and then vote to adopt the ordinance at your discretion and conduct first reading by title only, as well as adopt the resolution on the fees.
All right, thank you, Sean and Amy. Is there any public comment here in the room, maybe, perhaps? Now would be the time. All right, we have a wonderful.
Yes, hello everyone, Stuart Baker with the Chamber.
Hi, Stuart.
And hello Doug and council members, city staff. I just wanted to show my appreciation to city staff, our appreciation as the Chamber for the work that you've done to get us to this place. I think, Sean, you just gave a good example because I was hearing a lot from different folks. Why is this fee? It just seems kind of random, and you've broken it down really publicly, fairly, transparently, and I think that's important because, you know, I mean, right now we are in a bit of a dining crisis. You know, we want to do everything that we possibly can to both support current restaurants in operation and attract additional restaurants to the spaces that are currently empty. So we really appreciate the work that you've all done on this. I know it's been a pretty heavy lift. There's been a lot of opportunities for public comment. I know, Amy, you've held a number of sessions, and yes, so thank you for that. And we're working really hard to see if we can get at least one parklet off the ground, so at least we as the Chamber, when we work to attract new businesses here, we can show that as an amenity that exists and it is possible to do. So we'll be doing everything we can to make that happen. So thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. All right, do we have any additional other public comment in the room? There we go. You didn't have to go first.
I know. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate everything you all do. Genuinely do. I'm still a little bit confused about some of the breakdowns of numbers, which I've looked over, but that's okay also. I just want to say that I feel like for me, possibly having the first parklet, that it's going to be very expensive for me to do. And $3,000 and $1,500 and to build a parklet is just not financially feasible for me. And when I'm looking at these numbers, I'm thinking, okay, well, when I add 50 cents for the parking, I just want to go out and put quarters in, right? So it's like, could I just do that and it would cost me less? Because then it's 50 cents an hour times 6 hours or 9 hours a day times 6 days times 24 days because you don't charge on Sundays, that the dollar amount for me doesn't work out. And then you've got the $1,500 for the permit. So we're at, I mean, the $3,000 is not what it would cost if you had people parking there every single day for all of those hours. And so for me, that just doesn't work in my head, and I'm okay for clarification. I would love for clarification on that. And then you add the $1,500, and then I got to pay for the parklet, and it just feels like with all these costs, you don't want me to have the parklet. You don't want me to be that person in the restaurant business to have this going on because it's just not affordable. I really want to do it, and I have some money to do it, but all these things just add up to so much money and I've already put a ton of money into it. And, you know, I've been to other meetings where I have to buy also add in new seating, stuff that is bolted, maybe. I don't know all the things that are going to go along with it. And it just feels really expensive to me. And it doesn't feel like it'll be worth it to me, even though I want it to be. So I'm trying really hard to figure out how to make that be a thing that I can afford. And I'm creating a lot of tax revenue for the city of Nevada City by having outside dining. People love it. People really enjoy it. They like sitting out on Broad Street. So I'm really hoping that some of these fees can somehow be reduced a little bit to help people out. And I know going forward, things have to change, right? It's just, we're trying to get around right now. But and maybe fees can change later down the road. I'm in for what's going to happen for the next 3 months, for sure. But I just don't know that all of these fees and everything I'm going to have to pay for in the next 3-4 months to get this going and taken care of to have it is going to work for me. And I really want it to. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, is there any additional public comment in the room? If not, we will go to the virtual sandbox.
Yes, anybody on Zoom wish to make a comment on item 10 on the agenda, please raise your virtual hand. I do have one. Mark, you can go ahead and address the council.
Yes, my name is Mark Fennicle. I'm a member of the board of directors of Freed. And first of all, I wanted to thank the city for reaching out to Freed during the drafting process. We're always here as a resource for you. Freed originally advocated for a 5-foot minimum rather than the 4-foot minimum. I see that the city is looking at 4.5, which is quite a nice help for those of us who use wheelchairs or are blind and need to have the space in order to traverse the city. Personally, I would like to see the 5-foot minimum, as I've fallen off of curbs more than my share of times. And it's kind of scary. The closer in you got to be, especially to people who are sitting in chairs, maybe having a few drinks. They tend to push their chairs back very quickly without warning, without looking behind them, and other issues of that nature that aren't obvious to people who don't live in a wheelchair like I do. So that's some of my personal experience. The other concerns I would have on the parking issue is for blue sections, disabled parking places that may be on the street. I'm hoping this won't affect the number of them. And also for people who park using a wheelchair accessible van, the state requirement is 8-foot clearance from where you deploy the lift. So keep that in mind. Also, as far as putting tables and chairs in front of these establishments, there's generally no problem, provided that they make sure that access to the interior of their businesses is not compromised. Beyond that, there are a lot of little tiny details that are not really, I don't really have the time to go into right now. But so long as those things are being looked at, if there's some kind of enforcement or oversight to make sure that the establishments are not encroaching further than the ordinance provides, I think we're good. So I appreciate the city's time, and again, Freed is always here to help with any issues that have to do with our disabled population. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fennicle. Really appreciate it. Is there anybody else online who would like to comment?
If there's anyone else who would wish to comment on item 10, please raise your hand. Not seeing anyone.
And if you would like, Mr. Mayor, we could address a couple of the items that were brought up because they are included in the ordinance, and just to make sure that they meet your needs if you wanted to be responsive to the comments. There is, parklets would not be allowed in ADA parking. They also would not be allowed in limited term parking, otherwise known as green curb, like you see in front of City Hall and other places at the bottom of Broad Street. That's for two purposes. One, it's a limited term parking, but also limited term parking is available to ADA parkers for longer than the temporary time. So it is a kind of a de facto ADA parking spot. There are additional restrictions that limit the parklets within proximity of intersections, roadways, other parklets, fire hydrants, and the like, to allow for those kind of considerations related to ADA parking and the use of lifts and other devices that may extend beyond the parking spot.
Okay, can you speak a little bit to the fees? Like, we had a long discussion about other ways to skin a cat, because, you know, as was pointed out, that, you know, it's a big chunk of change right up front for, you know, some businesses who may be struggling. So we had a long conversation about this. Could you sort of elucidate the public about some of the thoughts on how to make this more palatable for the businesses?
Sure, and
Not to put you on the spot.
no, that's my job. Not to put Melissa on the spot, but if it's okay with her and with the council, I'd like to just use her example so that we can, you know, have that, since it's a public hearing anyway.
He was going to do it anyway.
Wait for consent.
The reason that the charging just for Go Feed the Meters doesn't work is because you're also excluding it from parking space use in its entirety. So in other words, people can't park after we would charge for the meters, before we would charge for the meters, on holidays, on weekends. They can't, it's simply no longer available as a parking spot. So that's where.
But we're not losing revenue on it.
So
It's
that's,
just lost parking.
no, so three prongs. We are losing revenue.
Well, I understand that we are, but I'm saying past metered time, we lose the parking
Correct.
space, but we're not losing
Right.
revenue.
So that's why essentially the three components there are the loss of revenue, which, like I said, is at a maximum be $2,496. Although many of the Broad Street meters do have a higher use on average, we have about an 80% use of our meters, so that's where that $2,000 portion comes in. And then the other two components are the loss of use of the parking spot. And so that is the taxpayers, the community, the adjacent business owners, the visitors no longer have that parking spot available. And so there is a material cost to that. And we benchmarked that against what is already written in our municipal code, in our ordinances, the value of a parking spot removed is $4,500. So two parking spots, which is what a parklet would be, the value of that is $9,000. But we wouldn't charge that every year because you're not losing that forever. We're amortizing that over 10 years for approximately $900 charge for that. The intent there, as the intent is in the ordinance for that $4,500 bounty, is that the city would take that money and invest it in additional parking in another location. That is what's written in the ordinance in the other section. And so that's what that collection of fees is intended to do. And then the last component is it is city taxpayer-owned property for which we are leasing it to somebody, and it has a value, just like we lease a bookstore or a realtor office or a home or a myriad of other properties that the city owns. There's a lease payment associated with that. So those are the three components. We've done our best to make it as fair as possible, given the actual values of what we have here. And I am keenly aware of the impact and of on on our restaurants, and just, we've lost some, we are gaining a couple, but not gaining them at the rate that we are losing them. Nonetheless, it's my job to present to you the fiduciary obligation of the city. That being said, the council certainly can direct staff to find other public value in the costs of the parklets. Alternatively, they could ask us to take a more conservative approach, or another way to say it, a less business-friendly approach, and not take it at 80% for the meter fees, and not take the lower end of the value of the lease. So the council certainly could direct us to attempt to push it down farther, although I would say that there's limited space there to measure public value outside of those dollars, or push it up. What we've presented to you this evening, we think is fair and consistent with the other ordinances and our other charges for leases within the city, but certainly open to your direction if it is, if it's not the middle, if you would like it to push up or push down, or open to that direction.
Thank you, John. One more thing. Could you just sort of talk a little bit about the amortization? Because I think that concept right there, while it's not reducing the fees, drastically, is allowing, a period to pay those, and it's a lot more palatable, it would seem to me, and the people I've talked to, than having to pay for that up front, for the first time for somebody who, who's, doing a parklet for the first time. Are all these, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Are all these fees, can these all be amortized, or is it, there are some of these things?
What does that word mean?
Paid over a period of time.
Got it.
So essentially, the only thing that's amortized is the bounty or the parking space cost, because otherwise, all things being equal, we would have to charge the $2,000 of the lost meter revenue and $4,500 for each parking spot, or $9,000. But the intent of that, as written in the ordinance, isn't to be a recurring every year charge on when, like, if someone were to take a parking spot out of Cal Organics, which is not proposing to do that. I'm just giving you an example. It's a one-time payment of that. So
that would be the $3,000 parklet fee?
No, that's
9,000.
yeah, the $3,000 is comprised of the loss of revenue from the meters, the loss of the use as a parking spot, and the lease value. And it's really more than $3,000, but that's if you pay the lump sum. What the bistro would pay in total, if you were to adopt this evening, would be $220 by September 30th to apply, because we're saying that those that apply that have temporary permits will be a renewal application instead of a new application. Even if it's a new encroachment permit, they're coming off of a temporary outdoor dining permit, so it's kind of a renewal. It's just a way to, we already have them on file, they've already provided their insurance, there's a reduced cost in staff when processing the application, $220, and then that would cover everything going through the Planning Commission's review, Brian and Amy's ultimate review, and Brian's issuance of the encroachment permit. At the point of issuance of the encroachment permit, that's when the fee of $3,000 would be due. Or she could choose, the bistro could choose, sorry, Melissa, to pay monthly at $316 per month.
For 10 years.
But starting January 1st?
At the issuance of your encroachment permit.
The 220 would be October 1st for 3 months for the 250, correct? And then does that roll into starting January 1st is the next 3,000 and, sorry, I'm confused on that. So 3,000 plus 1,500 plus building the parklet? So I'm just,
No $1,500 for those that have existing permits. $220 is the application cost.
for these 3 months, for those 3 months?
It's the three, there is no 3 months. It's, we are going to allow those who are applying for an encroachment permit to continue their outdoor dining until they get through the process. So for at least 90 days. So it's not, you're not paying, nobody's paying for 3 months time. So. and I'm trying not to respond back and forth, but the public hearing's still open, and I appreciate the council's indulgence.
All right.
I also have a fee question,
Okay.
if that's
so-
relevant.
So why don't you start with the council questions then, Lou?
Okay, this is just one of several questions I have.
Sure.
Sorry.
It's your turn.
It's a very, very big topic. My first one is fairly simple. So the fees are based on what it costs the city to have a parklet in place. But aren't we actually gaining some revenue as well by increased sales tax? And shouldn't that offset some of those fees?
In practical terms, you would not use the increased sales tax to offset any of those fees. It does not offset our loss of revenue for the meters. It just doesn't. We would get the revenue from the meters whether or not there is sales tax generated from a restaurant or not, whether or not there's a restaurant there. It does not offset the loss of it as parking to the community. This is owned by the taxpayers. They are losing it as parking. And it also does not offset the ability to, or the need to charge a lease for the use of city taxpayer-owned property. For example, Harmony Books generate sales tax. We don't reduce their lease payment because they generate sales tax. So their lease payment is based on the value of the property leased, which is an obligation of the city to the taxpayers in doing so. I understand the argument, I appreciate the argument, and I would love to support the argument. But more importantly, I think finding other ways to support businesses and to support the restaurants and to keep them open and to open other restaurants is going to be a much better prospect for you than to try to reduce what are relatively small fees, the $900 a year on the lease payment and the $900 a year on the loss of parking. When we really do need to charge for those things, incentivizing in other ways would be a much
What are those other
more
ways?
sound prospect.
What are those other ways to support businesses?
Come to next Wednesday, everybody come to our strategic planning session where we will talk about that. So I don't think there's anything in this ordinance that would allow for that, although I think there are many ways we can support or help businesses have small business programs. You could certainly choose to use some of your ARPA funds or in the strategic planning process, direct a loan program for our small businesses that may allow the fees for parklets to be in part of that loan program. There's a variety of ways to do it. Nonetheless, the obligation of the city is to charge reasonable fees, offset its revenue losses, and in that regard. So to the extent possible, we could charge money and profit off of this. That would be legal. We are nowhere near profiting off this. This is the lowest fee that you could reasonably tie to anything that we do as far as commercial leasing, loss of value, which is already established in our ordinances for parking, as well as the loss of meter rates, which we know what those are. I know nobody likes that, but it's.
I certainly don't, I'm not questioning your integrity around this, and I trust you wholeheartedly, and if you say we are not making money off of this, I know that we're not, and I trust your numbers. And what are we going to do to support our restaurants to be able to get this done when they are already underwater? Like, what are we doing? What can we do? I'm thinking about those ARPA funds. I'm thinking about, what is there a way, and this might be a silly comment, but is there a way to, offset with the ARPA funds and allow for a year grace period? Is there a way to support these women and other businesses in town with these large costs. I mean, the design standards are necessary. It has to look a certain way. We all understand the reason for that, but with design standards are also, it's cost. It's more cost. So we're doing a fair thing, and it's still not good enough.
Which is a really good point, because if I want to offset my parking because I could put a parklet out there because I'm making more tax money to offset that, well, I'm going to be sitting in J.J. Jackson saying if I have a free parking space in front of my building so somebody can park there and shop in my store, they're going to make more tax money to offset that. There's some real equity issues here. The city has provided for a very long time free square footage for restaurants. I know it's tough, I know it's hard, and I know this is difficult. I think that there are possibilities when we talk about the ARPA funds, but as I look at this ordinance as it is written now, we've reduced the overall impact of if we were to take the full rate on the meters, we've reduced that 20%. We've provided options to reduce the impact fees, and this is how I understand the fee for a parking space is an impact fee. If you're a business that comes in and you're going to build a building and you have to have X amount of parking spaces, the city has set those at $450. If you cannot provide that parking, you pay that $450 so the city can provide that parking elsewhere and aggregate that money, because the parking is still required. And it's not just required for the single business that has the parklet, it's required for all of the businesses on the street that benefit from having people park there. So it's a really complex deal. I think we need to be very careful. There are a lot of fairness issues in here. Restaurants have suffered, but so have all the other businesses. And that we really need to not put ourselves in a position of thinking about how we subsidize one class of business over others. And it's really delicate. I really appreciate the situation, and I appreciate your humor about the situation, and I understand how complex this is to understand. We still have to pay for a city, we still have to be within the boundaries of the law, and we still have to be fair to the entire business community. And this is all wrapped up in that. Now, as Sean said, next week, when we talk in our strategic planning process, if there is a way we want to incentivize those, well, we can take that up then as a business support program. In terms of this ordinance, I think we need to be very careful about how we approach it tonight. If you want to offset these fees with another program, that's fine. But these fees are extremely fair, extremely reasonable, and it is a really strong effort to balance all of the needs of the entire community. Also, a significant amount of input has been heard, and with all due respect, we have one area of resistance. People are going to look at that and figure out how to proceed. We need to proceed carefully here, but everything I see here has been done really well, carefully thought out, and is as fair as it can be in a situation that is extremely difficult. We inherited a total freaking mess. When we got this, you could do whatever you wanted on that street without safety considerations, without any kind of considerations. We've had to rein it in. Whenever you have to regulate something, whenever you got to the gate is broken, everybody's out running around, and you got to bring them back in. It's always difficult, and it's always going to be hard for people. But we still have a need to do that because we have to protect the viability of the entire business community. That's where I am on the fee part of it. I got other comments that I need to make.
But I totally agree with everything you said, and I don't think this is subsidizing one type of business over another, because we're also looking at parking. We're also moving forward on solutions with parking. So I don't think that this is necessarily prioritizing. I think restaurants are at question right now. Like that's the topic, that's the business that we're discussing with this. Does that mean other businesses shouldn't be considered? Absolutely not. Does not mean that. So yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you.
Okay, Gary, would you like to go ahead and comment in the second half?
So here's the other part, is process, always process for me. I went through this, I heard from some folks, but I went through this and parsed out. I'm really interested in the approval process, about how these things are approved for aesthetics.
Same here.
So when you read through the documentation, and I understand, particularly the Public Works Director, why encroachment permits reside with the engineering department and why zoning issues reside with planning. That's the way the law is written and stuff. So this sort of by default falls to engineering. I like engineers a lot, but sometimes we should worry about their aesthetic values when we're doing things. Nothing personal against engineers. Some engineers have great aesthetic values. They're in a minority. What I would like to see here, and it is not entirely clear, and I have spoken to some planning commissioners, and I believe the planning commission assumed that they would have oversight of these parklets. It is not at all clear that that is the case here. So I would, if we do pass this ordinance, I'm going to recommend that we add language that the city engineer shall, not as it is may, but shall have the parklets reviewed by the planning commission for consistency with the ordinance and aesthetic values. And this takes, we already, I think, received letters earlier from the Historic Society where they had a number of minor aesthetic issue pieces. That takes care of all of that because it then runs back to the planning commission. That's my primary thing. The rest of it is minutia. I know that there was one other piece out there that I just wanted to speak to, where there was concerns about gates and ABC and all of that. Because if you're going to have an ABC license, you have to have fencing and gates, and you have to control access. So I don't think that's a city deal. I think that that's a deal, if you want an ABC license, that you have to comply with the ABC. And if that requires a gate, then you got to do it. So I know that that's concern of some folks, but that is a requirement of ABC and not necessarily of the city. But if you're going to serve it, you got to have the compliance there. So those are my issues, but my main concern is the process piece, and that it does go back, any of those designs do go back to the planning commission.
The way I understand it, though, is that they go to the planning commission first, once they get it done, and then if it's a renewal, they don't have to go back.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, that is the caveat there. Once it's done, it's done. The city engineer can renew a permit, or if a business changes hands and it stays the same, no further review is required once it's done. But if they change it, if it physically changes, then it needs to go back to the planning commission. So I think that language would be shall be reviewed by the planning commission, except in the case in which a permit is being transferred and no physical changes are being made. Or renewed, and no physical changes are being made.
Fair enough. Adam?
Yeah, I first of all just want to thank the gentleman from Freed for bringing up his particular issues. This town is not always easy for everybody to navigate, and that's a shame because we should be a place where everybody feels welcome. The vehicle I drive the second most after my own car is a wheelchair van, so that hits home, and I appreciated him calling in. When I think about it's such a gamble to run and own a business of any kind, and some stuff you try is going to work and some isn't, and it's your livelihood, and that's a scary gamble, and this feels like we're adding another gamble for everybody who wants to try this, where is this going to pay for itself and be worth it for me, or should I not try this, or will I try this and it won't work out? So I think as thoughtful as we can be about people's mindsets in dealing with this extra expense that may or may not pay for itself. I think when we're looking at strategic planning, we should do whatever we can to ease that worry, because we're losing good restaurants all the time, and let's keep the ones we've got and make it as easy as possible for new good restaurants to come in. So is this something, are we deciding if we're going to vote on this tonight or push it to the 28th? What's the?
I have some more questions.
Okay. Are you done?
I yield my time to my friend Daniela.
Oh, there we go.
Thanks for bringing up Mark's comments from Freed. Adam, I have that on my list too. Sean, Amy, questions. In terms of the ADA, we're specifically talking about the sidewalk, correct? We're not talking about sidewalk.
Both sidewalk and parklet.
Okay, so when we talk about 4 feet versus 5 feet versus 4.5.
Sorry, that's
yeah.
the sidewalk.
Got it. So when we approved Commercial Street, we approved that at its minimum, it would be 9 feet, and then there were parts that were went up to nearly 11 feet, correct?
I believe that's right, yeah.
So, and I know that this gets tricky because restaurants are where they are now, but might not always be where they are now. Where the restaurants are currently, do we know that those are at 9 feet? I mean, the whole reason that, part of the reason that I was advocating for the 11 to expand was so that we would have more space to consider the 5 feet for ADA, and that the restaurants would still have ample space beyond 4 feet. And so I'm curious, can you talk to that a little bit?
Broad Street is different than commercial.
Sure.
We haven't measured the streets on Commercial Street, or sorry, the sidewalks on Commercial Street.
Well, we have documentation for sure. We just redid it, right?
Essentially, none of them in their current configuration can have anything other than a two-top where you're sitting in line with the sidewalk. Regardless of the width of the sidewalk, if you put a chair either against the building or against the sidewalk, for somebody to get into that will push you into either that 5 or 4.5 foot buffer. So that's why you see like Hartwood has 2 of those two tops. Now, it may be possible in those sections that are 11 feet, if they were exactly in front of a restaurant, to have a 3-seater with one with their back to the sidewalk or to the street, but generally not. And then that's the only street in the city that has that great continuity.
Sure.
Broad Street has some sections, but it has other unique challenges too.
Yep.
And this would apply in Seven Hills as well.
Yeah.
Both components.
I would like to see us consider the 5 feet for ADA as opposed to 4.5, personally.
And 5 feet makes it more restrictive for the businesses, is that what you mean? Okay.
Yes.
And in some cases, we'll virtually eliminate sidewalk dining on Broad Street.
How so?
It's like runs between 8 and 9 feet. It's not 9 feet the whole way, so, well, I guess you could probably still do a two-top, but it's gonna be pretty tight, because if you got 5 feet, that's down, if you're 8 foot, that gives you 3 feet. It's pretty tight, so.
Do we
I
have
understand
sidewalk
why-
dining on Broad Street?
We don't currently. We only have any on Commercial Street, and that's because they had street dining permits, but the street was closed. And then, we reopened the street, and there's no street dining, so we are allowing temporary sidewalk dining. My suggestion or recommendation would be that we could move forward with what this is. We certainly can bring back to you a measurement of Broad and Commercial through its entirety and talk about each addressing, and if there was to be a restaurant or, at any of those addresses, what that would look like. And then we could make an adjustment if there needed to be. I think, right now, the only opportunity you have are the ones on Commercial anyway, because that's the only place that is currently permitted.
Yeah.
A lot of places have had benches and tables. None of them have ever been permitted.
Right.
So, and I don't want to rehash the past, and I don't want to, upset people about their flower pots. I just want to, get to a place of neutral buoyancy on what the council and the community would like to do in this regard.
And also, I believe the federal standard is 4 feet, is that correct?
Yes.
ADA, yeah.
And 4 feet. We're at 4.5 is what we were looking at, and then the request is to 5, so it's tight no matter how you look at it. Somebody's getting squeezed no matter how you look at it.
Yeah. Well, people with disabilities are always the ones getting squeezed.
Yeah, always.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the council?
I have one, and it comes from a session that I attended at the League of Cities, which addressed parklets and safety. And there was an expert there who said what is often not considered in these ordinances is whether or not the chair that someone is sitting in is up against a barrier, which could get hit by a vehicle, at which point the kinetic force of the vehicle will be transferred from the barrier to the chair to the occupant. I see nothing in this ordinance that protects occupants from that sort of injury.
One of the biggest problems with the parklets, they're on the street.
Yeah, that was good. That was almost like a lawyer. It was a question without it being a question.
You know where I'm
So,
from.
I appreciate that. No offense. That's like good, Socratic method almost. So yes, the parklets are not designed for occupant safety. The railings on the perimeters of them are designed for ADA barrier, so that you couldn't just step off the edge of the parklet into the street, which is a drop. No more than the railing that we put in the new sidewalk segment when we did Commercial Street going up the sidewalk on Pine Street is designed to protect pedestrians from car impact. It's designed for the pedestrians not to fall into the street. So if a car strikes a parklet or a handrail, or for that matter, a building, those things are not engineered to protect from that. And that is a concern in a lot of jurisdictions. You'll find in the ordinance that we restrict parklets to streets with a maximum speed limit of 25 miles an hour. I recognize that 25-mile-an-hour impact is significant no matter what. It is not something that we had directly considered in the creation of the ordinance. We did look at many, many other ones. This is based on best practices from other locations. I would say, though, that we could evaluate that potential with staff and looking at the interior configurations. If it's ultimately a safety issue that can be remedied in that fashion, and it is that concerning, it is something that could be a condition upon their encroachment permit. But you already have a space from the street, then the railing, then an open, then a space. So we just have to look at what the configurations are or might be, and then we could, in theory, it could be part of the condition of the encroachment permit. Realizing that these are not fixed seating against, these are all tables and chairs and umbrellas that are could be moved.
But if safety is an important thing, and obviously it has sort of gone by the wayside in some of this parklet conversation. If we were to add additional safety features to the parklets to protect the public from vehicles driving at 25, they go a lot faster than 25 miles an hour down the street, wouldn't that increase costs to the applicant to have to make that security or to make it even, safer?
Absolutely. I mean, if you wanted to create something that was engineered to protect a parklet occupant from a car strike, which we don't do in a parking space currently. So if someone's standing in a parking space, they could. Exactly. That would be exceedingly expensive, yes.
You have to put balls. We're going to do it. I know it's going in the street. I've been a public safety guy. I've been a public works guy. I would never put something in the street like that. Not ever. Because of the safety issues. It's just a matter of time. That's just the way it is. The interface between automobiles and pedestrians and people is just completely eliminated. And what you put up there that looks like barriers is purely aesthetic.
I hear you, and I agree with you, and I think part of what parklets do is shifting culture to more walkable cities and less cars, and that's where I would like to see Nevada City in the years to come, is more restrictive for vehicles.
My worry is principally if we permit these things, then does the city become liable for injuries that might occur?
It's on city property. The city has, exactly. Yeah, we would, Russ, cover your ears, just kidding. It's city-owned property. So if something happens there, the city has risk. And you can't say that a parklet has no inherent risk. It certainly does. And, I've spent my entire career in public safety, and, I don't necessarily love what we're doing here. At the same time, I would say the alternative, if you made a very robust bollard system protecting all these parklets, we're more likely to have injuries and inherent risk to the car that will inevitably strike those bollards that the streets weren't designed for. So either way you go, this is, our streets were not designed to have parklets on them, but our city was also not designed to have the impacts of COVID. And so we're living out of that, and this was a novel, which became a pretty widespread approach to, keeping restaurants in business as much as could happen. And, if the council wants to move forward, I think this is a well thought out, good approach. If it's not the best approach and you want something different, we certainly could bring you something different back. Or if there's minor changes that we can make tonight, we can do that as well.
Okay, is there any consensus amongst us of any changes that we would like to propose to this ordinance as it stands?
I think Gary's was good.
Yeah, the review process.
So I have that it's in 12.05.050, and it changes the second sentence, the city engineer or his designate may receive a recommendation from the architectural review committee, ... It changes this to the city engineer or his designee shall receive a recommendation from the architectural review committee. The architectural review committee is the planning commission by definition in our ordinance, and then it also adds except for renewal or resubmittal applications without a change to the parklet. Does that capture?
I would suggest we, if you'd like to make that change, you instruct us to revise 12.05.050, and we'll bring it back to you in the final ordinance. I'd like to reword that a little differently than just replacing the one word may with shall.
Thank you, Russ. Well, we have you, Russ.
Perfect.
Yep, that's what we'll do.
Yeah, I'd like to start that off with prior to the issuance of a parklet dining encroachment permit by the city engineer, the ARC shall, and then fill it in from there, so same exact idea, just slightly different sentence or two.
Perfect, thank you, Russ. Do we have any, so that was the one main change here. Is there anybody else that, are we going to talk about the fees anymore? I'd like to talk to the audience. I know I can't do that, but
Well, you never close the public hearing, so you certainly could. You certainly could ask.
Melissa, would you kind of mind coming up for a second? And I want to run the numbers real quick, okay? Because I'm confused too a little bit. There's a lot of numbers here. Could we use her business as an example of what she would, under the new, amortization process and renewal? What will she be responsible for out of pocket? Can you do that right now?
Yeah, so she currently has 3 parking spots. I don't know how that happened, but it's going to end up being.
I have 2.
It's going to end up being 2.
No, I have 2. I currently have 2. I don't have 3.
Okay.
There's 2 parking spots.
All right, let's just go with 2 parking spots.
So, yeah.
Usually start with 2 because you're bigger than 2.
So.
I'm inside the lines of 2 parking
Okay.
spots.
So the totality of the space is 2 parking spots.
Okay.
She will fill out an application by September 30th, because that's when her temporary permit expires. Fill out that application, pay $220. And start working with staff on submitting her plans, her design for her parklet. And the chamber and volunteer architects and others have been working behind the scenes to try to see if this would be possible. As they are working through that process, her temporary permit will be extended to the extent that she's working through the process. So that's written in the ordinance as at up to 90 days, but staff will, if it ended up that, we have a fire, and then we have Thanksgiving, and then we have Christmas, and it's got to be 97 days, it's that the intent clearly is that, we work for that logical transition from the temporary to the permanent. When we issue, upon issuance of the encroachment permit for the parklet, for her to be able to build that parklet, she would have to pay the fee. Either take a monthly payment program or take the lump sum of $3,000. So if she took the lump sum, what she will pay to the city is $3,220. And that will be for 1 year of the parklet. And for practical purposes, it starts with the issuance of the encroachment permit, but the 1 year, just in practical terms, is when it's signed off by the city engineer that it's complete. Because, I mean, just like you built a house, you know, we give you a certificate of occupancy when it's livable. We'll say this is complete, and then it'll be 1 year from that date that she would need to renew and pay those same two fees, $220 and $3,000.
So the total fees would be $3,220 annually if she pays it a lump sum.
Correct. If a new business came into town 2 years from now, they would pay $1,500 to go through the process because they are not a renewal application.
So 1,500 as opposed to?
220. And then each renewal after that, only the 220.
And just for clarity, how does that look differently for the private property folks, Three Forks, Golden Era?
So we have existing ordinances. Those are in our zoning ordinance that relates to that requires a conditional use permit. Conditional use permit process goes through the Planning Commission, and that is where you talk about those parking takes and all of those things. There's existing rules there. Three Forks, Golden Era would need to comply with those. What we've done in rate setting here is, because they also have temporary permits for that, is that they would fall under the temporary, they would fall under a re-application. So instead of paying, is it $2,000 for a CUP? It's $2,000 for conditional use permit, because instead they pay $220. We'll pay more than $220 just to announce the public hearing for that process to go through the Planning Commission. So that is the one and only thing that we could exercise or request that the council approve in this process. But we would certainly, and we've discussed opportunities at both locations to find ways to assist them through the transition in the same way that we're potentially assisting the parklets, and we could bring that back to the council at a later date as we work through their transitions. They would also be subject to the same thing. If Mama G gives us $220 in an application that says, I want to get a conditional use permit for the back of Golden Era, we will allow her to continue with what is going on in the back there during the time that we're working to process that conditional use permit until the snow kicks us out.
We don't know about
One
snow.
other thing to note about the private property conditional use permits, that's an entitlement, so they don't have an annual fee that they'd have to pay after that. It's just, it's on their private property, they're not paying us to maintain that.
And then they're entitled, and they get it for, even if the business sells, as long as it's tied to the property at that point.
So that's not an annual renewal each year, so that's great. What about partnering with neighboring businesses? You know, we were talking a little bit about that as a possibility to reduce some of the costs where, you know, another business that's going to use an outdoor non-public space would be able to partner with, I guess, a newer organization would be able to partner with an existing organization, and would there be some savings there? I think we talked a little bit about that.
Shared application, essentially. So had Calla Lily's not gone out of business, Calla Lily's and the Classic Cafe share frontage and could be co-applicants, so they would each pay half in theory. You do have to be on the frontage in front of the restaurant to be able to use the space. So it couldn't be that the bistro applies to be in front of City Hall, for example. You can apply.
It's green, you already said that.
Does that help a little bit? I mean, and does it help?
Just for my clarification on fees, for me personally at Bistro 221 is, so the 220 And that will cover until we come together with the parklet situation. And then I will pay for the parklet situation and also then the $3,000, and then that $3,000 covers me for a year plus that $220. Or is it $3,200 once we get approved? After that, the next year will be, say we get it approved January 15th, right? So then January 15th, 2024, then it would be 3220?
Correct.
Okay, so from that time, so it's 32, it would be 3220. So this 1,500 parking, parklet dining encroachment permit is considered in that annual fee?
No, that is only when you open a new restaurant and do
Gotcha.
a new parklet, and you're not a renewal.
Okay, fabulous, that's great.
First time.
First time.
Perfect. And then, let me think.
What's the name of your new restaurant?
Right, yeah. Let's see. So then also on that, what I'm just wondering about the use permit with private property. I get confused how a charge can be taken on private property, but the police won't come do anything on my private property. So that's a confusion for me that I can't have anybody towed away. I have a camera out in front and people dump trash, but I'm told that they won't do anything when I find, and I have people pictured on it, but it's private property. Then why is it that anybody has to pay a fee for their own thing if the city is not protecting my property? And especially, again, like I have cameras. I'm being told that, sorry, I can't do anything. You have pictures of people doing things illegal to your property, but we can't do anything with it. So that's a little piece of confusion for me, and not that you have to answer that question right now. It feels frustrating, and maybe somebody can email me and let me know what the answer to that is, because that's not really what this conversation is about. But I'm super clear. I feel like I'm clear on $220, $3,000 going forward, and then at that point, then it's that $320 from the going forward a year later. I'm totally good with that, just so you know. That's not a non-issue for me. I really enjoy the outside dining. I know my customers really enjoy the outside dining. We've been doing this since COVID happened, not a single issue. I get that public safety is a very important thing, but we have not had a single issue in any way. Knock on wood, we don't have to. I don't know where, right? I don't know all the different businesses, and I understand you have to have your ordinances to cover things, because you don't know what business is going to be doing it here or there. I'm just below a stop sign. I'm super not concerned about it. Maybe I should be more, but again, I've not had any issues with cars coming barreling through, and there's always a car right up against the parklet. So they're going to hit that car first. I don't know. Maybe not. Hopefully not. Hopefully none of that ever happens. And again, I really appreciate this. I think that it's really important to pay attention to the ordinances and know that changes can be made, right? I mean, if a change has to be made, I don't know what the bylaws are to be able to make a change in an ordinance. But starting off, we're moving. What'd you say?
30 days in the council.
So you have lots of options to be able to help work with us. Again, my customers love the outside dining. I know I didn't go into Bistro 221 having outside dining, but I agree with Daniela about we're moving forward. Let's move forward a little bit and make our town a little bit cuter and do things that do attract people to want to come here. I mean, it's just such a great community. We have such a lovely community of people. They ask me all the time, why do you like to live here? Because I love this community. I love what everybody brings to the table. And I genuinely appreciate where the city has gone the last couple of years. Okay, actually, I'm going to go backwards. 18 months, year and a half. I mean, I genuinely feel more supported. And the community. Sorry, no. I mean, I just genuinely feel more supported. And the communication that's happening Stuart and the chamber, all of you, the planning commission. I mean, it really just feels different to me, and I appreciate that. And I do a lot. I feel like I try to give back as much as I can in all different kinds of ways. And I also want to feel supported by the city in doing what I'm doing. I don't make a lot of money. I'm just here to do what I love to do and be part of the community. So that's all. And again, I get it. I get you have to have ordinances. You got to bank money. You got to do things. And I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and I'll try my hardest to stay in business. And I appreciate you. So
Thank you,
if
Melissa.
you have more questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks so much.
I move that we hold the first reading, waive reading of ordinance in its entirety, read only by title, schedule second reading, and adopt
With the one.
with the modifications listed previously by Carrie and Russ.
And the fee resolution.
And that.
Awesome.
All right, do I have a second? Second.
Would you like me to read the
No.
title?
Unless you have to.
I do,
He does.
because we said by reading
You
by
asked.
title
You have to
only.
read by title.
So this is ordinance 2022-10, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Nevada City, State of California, adding Chapter 12.05 to the Nevada City Municipal Code, establishing an encroachment permit process for allowing outdoor dining operations within the city rights of way, including sidewalk and park dining. In consideration of resolution, that's it. Sorry, the next part is the resolution, so that is the title of the ordinance. And if you'd like, Mr. Mayor, we could do a roll call vote, since you have a first and a second.
Yep.
Councilmember Cece?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fernandez?
Yes.
And Mayor Fleming?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to request a 3-minute bio break.
without a doubt. Let's take a 3-minute break, everybody. Stretch your legs. Thank you. Meeting of the City Council of the City of Nevada City back to order here, folks, and we're going to take care of our last item and then some reports, or last two items. All right, so,
We need to vote on the resolution.
Sorry?
The fee resolution,
That was adopted with the,
it wasn't, and it shouldn't be. They should be separate. So
Be a separate.
you stopped reading the title,
oh yeah,
at the title of the
that
ordinance.
was your point, right?
the motion was to adopt the ordinance and the fee resolution, though. And then I read the ordinance. We don't read the resolution. What would you like us to do?
Tell us what to do.
Vote on the resolution.
I move that we pass the resolution associated with the fees tied to parklets and encroachment permits for street side dining.
Second.
All right, first by Gary, second by Daniela.
Councilmember Cici,
See.
Councilmember Klein and Espanol,
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fernandez,
Yes.
Mayor Fleming.
Yeah, I better just say yes.
Thank you, Russ.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Russ.
I appreciate it.
Thanks, Russ.
No, you keep us out of trouble. We
Yep.
really appreciate it.
Okay, so item number 11, we're going to conduct a public hearing in consideration of ordinance number 2022-11, an ordinance repealing Chapter 8.12 garbage disposal and readopting Chapter 8.12 solid waste integrated waste management of Title 8 Health and Safety of the City of Nevada City Municipal Code relating to integrated waste management. Take it away, Sean.
Awesome. I'll start off by saying that both of these ordinances, and many of our ordinances, are a heavy lift from the city attorney's office, and most often Russ, so he's kind of like the unsung hero behind the scenes. So I'd like to say that, if we get it right, we give him credit, but he never gets credit. So just like to thank him remotely, wherever you are, sir.
Nice.
Nice because he just got on you about the resolution.
No. It almost never happens, so I'll take it. I like the one-off constructive criticism, much better than the repetitive. The state's passed a series of laws with regard to solid waste and recycling over the past couple of years. The most recent is called SB 1383, and it's the one that's in people's heads the most because it made a lot of people upset. It and other laws require specific action with regard to organic waste recycling, edible food recovery, and other related activities. We did apply for and received a 5-year low population waiver. That was literally on my first day here. And although the waiver means that we are exempt from some of the collection requirements, it does not exempt us from other aspects. And we're still required to have an enabling ordinance, which is what this is. As written, we were required on January 1st of 2022 to have an enabling ordinance. But this will get us caught up. It will not immediately change anything, however, because much of the requirements are not deliverable today because Waste Management doesn't have a process for organic waste recycling, or as well as there's no facility that can receive that. So that will happen over time. It'll happen the same for Grass Valley, Nevada City, and the county because we're use the same waste management and use the same facilities. But it will happen. And many of the requirements have a phase-in period through the rest of this year and go into full effect January of next year. So this year is mostly education, outreach, and the like. So the broad strokes, commercial properties, SB 1383 actually didn't require this other laws, but it's included in the ordinance. Commercial properties are required to participate in recycling collection. So across the board, it's 100% have to participate in recycling collection, or they can receive an approved waiver for shared collection or self-hauling. But the city is the one that has to create that pathway for them to have compliance. So we have to establish an inspection program or have it in Waste Management's contract to do that, but ultimately Waste Management does not do enforcement, so that will fall back to the city no matter what activities we ask them to perform. Commercial and residential properties will be required to participate in green waste and organics at the end of the waiver or when otherwise available. The city will have to have a process to issue waivers for waste collection and recycling as allowed under the law. We'll be required to provide education and outreach through next year on the topic and on the go forward after that. We have to develop and implement a edible food recovery program from commercial generators. Those are generally defined on tiers, Tier 1 and Tier 2. We have very few of them, but really the only one is SPD. But then there's a trickle-down effect essentially for all of our restaurants. The really good thing here, though, is that essentially all of Nevada City has been compliant with SB 1383 before it was even thought of as a law. So our businesses, our restaurants, SPD, don't throw away food that could be used by somebody else. You know, they have people that come and pick it up and distribute it to those in need. So it's wonderful. What the city will have to do is create a process by which we document and affirm that process is compliant with SB 1383. And so that's actually a really good story to be able to celebrate what our businesses do. Even though it's an unfunded mandate from the state, it's still good.
I just learned about the hogs, the pig farm. A lot of the spoiled
Slop,
the
yes.
food's going to the pig farm. I think that's awesome.
And we'll have to have an enforcement mechanism for noncompliance. Like I said, even if we ask Waste Management to do some of these things in the contract, they can't do enforcement. And then lastly, the ordinance includes a section on construction debris that is not in SB 1383, but is in other relevant laws. There are specific legal requirements for diversion and how much percentage and weights and things like that can come off of demolition and construction activities. And so as that is in the law, it's included in this holistic revision. As you see, we're just repealing what we had previously and adding new. Like I said, it is an unfunded mandate by the state, but if we don't adopt an enforceable ordinance, there will be enforcement action on us at some point. I don't think we're high on the list, but nonetheless, Cal Recycle is being aggressive with the requirements of implementation with this. We have met with them a number of times. They appreciate what we are trying to do. And Grass Valley and Nevada County have adopted enforceable ordinances already. Russ reviewed Grass Valley's, and a lot of the language that's in there is tied to or mirrors or sometimes is exactly the same as Grass Valley's because they use exactly the same three-tote system that we use and go to the same landfill, use the same waste management, and they're subject to all the same requirements that we are. So we are aligned in that regard. So with that, we would recommend that you conduct the public hearing and then vote to adopt the ordinance, conduct first reading by title only. There's no resolution to adopt, so I won't get yelled at on that topic on this one. With that, I will hand it back to you, Mr. Mayor.
I don't think you were yelled at.
I agree. I was not yelled at. I shouldn't say that.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Do we have any public comment in the room? Not seeing any. Let's look online.
If anybody would like to comment on item number 11, please raise your virtual hand. And I'm not seeing anyone.
All right, let's go to the council. Adam, do you have anything to talk about recycling organic waste?
When you talk about enforcement, which area of our city is going to enforce that?
Which department?
Yeah.
It will ultimately be code enforcement.
So who's that?
That is under the police department, yes.
Just checking.
Amanda is one of our code enforcement officers, and do we have somebody else now doing code enforcement? Just Amanda?
She's the primary.
Okay.
She does have assistants, but she's the primary.
Okay. Thank you. Gary?
I just, some of this goes back a ways, particularly the construction debris policy. I was dealing with that. It's good job, Sean, catching up on a lot of things, and I think the regulations being passed by the state around solid waste and recovery and green waste and stuff is just going to be, it's onerous, and it's going to continue to get more intense. There's good reasons for it, but it's going to get really tough on a small city to be able to comply with these. So I appreciate your relationship, the conversations and the doors open with Cal Recycle, because talking to your regulators is the only way through it. But it's tough already, and it's getting a lot worse, and especially when you start to get into segregation of construction debris, and that falls to the contractors, and they really dislike doing it, and it's so it's a real challenge. But it's good to be current with all these laws. So thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Danielle?
No comments. Thank you.
Lou?
Is it Second Harvest that is helping us with the collecting?
And the
Interfaith.
Interfaith
does it.
Yeah.
I just want to shout out to them, thank you for your civic mindedness and getting us ahead of the game.
Something we should celebrate for sure.
Well, one of the questions I have is, obviously, there's food that can get repurposed and distributed to people who are facing hunger insecurity. But what about the bad food? I mean, you're still supposed to take that out and get rid of that in a and you're not supposed to take that to the...
100% diversion from the landfill. But if it's non-edible, the one way, as the vice mayor noted, it's non-edible for human consumption doesn't mean that.
Feed it to the hogs.
Exactly.
Or the feedlots get a lot of
Eat everything but glass and lye.
Yeah, and there's
bone,
repurposing opportunities and composting. Biodigestion is what many would like to get to a point of. You can create a variety of things, not the least of which is natural gas to power a generator that creates electricity, that reduces the overall carbon footprint of, let's say, Nevada City, if we did it here. So they are trying to create opportunities. One of the things that I failed to mention, my apologies, is that part of SB 1383 requires that they are forcing a market for recycled materials. And so we will be obligated to purchase certain volumes of certain materials to create those markets. We will bring back to the council a resolution that will specify what those are in compliance with SB 1383. We don't have to do that tonight, but we will bring that back to you. The short version is we will be buying recycled paper for some of our copiers, most likely the one upstairs, which does the lion's share of the work, but it's not a color copier. So when we're producing color materials, we do it on the downstairs copier. And then we also have to buy implements from, composting or biochar or things like that. So we'll bring that back to you at another time.
Great. Thank you, Sean. Can I get a motion?
Sure.
I move to adopt this thing. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'll read the title after you're done.
My words have failed me.
So we have a motion.
Maybe you'll get
I'll second.
All right. First by Lou, second by Gary.
I'll second that thing.
Second. The thing has been seconded and
All right, so I will read ordinance, since you are reading by title only, waiving reading of this ordinance in entirety. We'll schedule for second reading on September 28th. It is ordinance 2022-11, an ordinance repealing Chapter 8.12 garbage disposal and readopting Chapter 8.12 solid waste integrated waste management of Title 8 health and safety of the City of Nevada City Municipal Code relating to integrated waste management. And with that, first, second reading, roll call, Councilmember Ceci.
Yes.
Councilmember Klein.
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson.
C.
In Espanol, Vice Mayor Fernandez.
Yes.
And Mayor Fleming.
yes. We.
In Francais.
All right. Motion passes 5-0. We don't have an extra person now. And to finish off the evening, we have item number 12, a consideration. Come on up, Chief. Consideration of the purchase of 2 new Chevrolet Tahoe police patrol vehicles from Enterprise in the amount of $106,000. The purchase of standard equipment to outfit said vehicles from various vendors in an estimated amount of $17,060. The uplifting of said vehicles geared up to meet the emergency vehicle lighting and safety standards in the amount of $32,100, and authorize our absent city manager to issue purchase orders for all of these items and exercise a contingency amount not to exceed $17,000 to place the vehicles in service. And we have our wonderful police chief to talk about these vehicles.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, again tonight. So I'll keep this somewhat brief and just open it to questions because we laid it out pretty well on here. Our staffing has increased, which is awesome. We're getting up to where we're supposed to be. With that comes, we need more vehicles. So we need at least one vehicle minimum per officer. Right now, we're actually down one, so we're kind of juggling vehicles to make that work. So this will get us up to a minimum. As was outlined in the report here a little bit, this does change slightly what we're going to be looking at. We mentioned code enforcement before. Code enforcement does not have a marked code enforcement vehicle. I think that's very important that they do so the community sees code enforcement out and about in town. One of these will not be used for that. One of these will pull off. Currently in the fleet, we have a Ford Explorer. Our fleet is, let me go back a little bit. Our fleet is exclusively Tahoes for the patrol personnel, Chevy Tahoes, and we have two Chevy Silverados for our sergeants, except for one Ford Explorer, which is the oldest vehicle in the fleet. So we'll be pulling that, and some people love that Ford Explorer too, and they're sad to see it go. But we'll be pulling that Ford Explorer off the fleet for the officers and putting it into service for a code enforcement vehicle. The idea right now is it will be graphics that are magnets that say code enforcement, because that way we can pull the magnet off if we have a vehicle being serviced, and it can actually go back into service as a patrol unit. So it'll be backup patrol unit. That was Sean's idea, not mine. I wish I could claim it, but that's a great idea. We'll probably be doing.
Don't ever say that, just.
But that's some of the ideas that we're working on with these two vehicles coming into the fleet. Going on over a couple of the big ticket items, the vehicles are expensive, $53,000 approximately per vehicle. The upfitting cost that you mentioned is the other big ticket item, which is about $16,000 per vehicle. That's the lights, the sirens, putting the radio in it, putting in all the equipment so that it can hold the MDTs, putting in the cage in the back. These don't come equipped as patrol vehicles. They come.
MDT?
I'm sorry?
MDT?
That's a computer. The computer that's where everything's dispatched to.
I don't always understand your accent.
Sorry, I apologize. I don't even know what it stands for, to be honest with you, but I know that's what it's called. But that's the computer in the computer. Or in the device. And then the cage, these don't come with any of that. They all have to be outfitted once you get them. So that's the big expense there. There was some question I know on these, what colors we're going for. I would like some feedback, or I'm interested in some feedback on that. I like black and white because it's very traditional, and we have a lot of visitors to this community, and it stands out as that's a police vehicle. The negative to that is we don't have any of those in the fleet now, so then we're going to start having a mosh posh until 8 or 10 years down the road when you can all get one color. Traditionally, we've used all white vehicles, which I think is probably what we will stick with. I'm sorry?
I've seen a lot of black ones.
Well, we have two black Chevy Silverados, and I'm not exactly sure how we got those. From my understanding is they got a great deal on them, probably because nobody else wanted all black vehicles, so they ended up purchasing them when they had a need.
Why wouldn't anybody want all black vehicles?
They can be standoffish and intimidating, and I agree. I would never advocate for those.
Don't we have one black Explorer? Don't we have one black?
I take that back. We have one black Explorer too, and that's the one we'll be pulling off the fleet.
Yeah.
Now, for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, but the black Explorer doesn't look as intimidating, but those black Silverados look.
It's the tinted windows.
Yeah, they can look intimidating, and I get it, and I've heard that very loud and clear.
Thank you for paying attention to that.
Yeah, and the other option is the all-white vehicles.
Yeah.
And I'm very open to any ideas on it. Sometimes I think the all-white vehicle can look some more like fire, and if you're not from around the neighborhood where you know of what it is and you're looking for a police officer, I mean, realistically, does it make much of a difference? No. But traditionally, we all know a black and white as a police vehicle. So that would be the design of the black fenders, the black rear with the white doors. Now, a lot of it's going to boil down to probably realistically the cheaper option, because if they have them in fleet as all white, usually it's paint or a wrap to put the black on them, and I don't know that I would recommend that for the added cost. But I'm open to feedback on that completely. For the equipment, we put about 8,530 for equipment, so 17,000 per vehicle, 17,000 total. A couple of those items I'll touch on is the box in the back was what stores all the gear. Those have to be secure boxes because those do hold long rifles, or which is your shotgun or your rifle to some extent, depending on where they're storing it. Holds ammunition, does hold a lot of secure equipment that you cannot just leave in the vehicle unsecured. The other thing, the big expense that's going in there, which will probably come down a little bit as we're price shopping, but I have to give an estimate of the highest that it could be, is we're looking at equipping all vehicles after some of these most recent school shootings with ballistic shields. And ballistic shields are something that will not be used in the public much, if ever, but you definitely want those. And what a ballistic shield is what it sounds like. It's a shield from what we used 100 years ago with these now stop bullets. And they're big enough and they're heavy enough that you put somebody behind them and they can stop bullets. They're rated for different calibers. What I'm looking at currently is the sergeants having a heavier shield and then the officers having a lighter one, which is substantially cheaper, but it's not necessarily cost, it's more weight. The heavier shields are almost 30 pounds. Even if it's a big guy holding a 30-pound shield on your arm is exhausting. Those can stop rifle rounds, but they're very, very heavy. And then so for all the other vehicles, I'm looking at using what's called a 3A, which will stop some smaller rifle rounds and handgun bullets. But they're substantially about a third the weight, so 10 pounds, which is much more manageable. So, I'm sorry?
School shootings are all
They're very frightening.
AR-15s.
And they are. An AR-15 will punch through the lighter shield. Now, when I say it'll punch through, it will slow it down drastically, and it's much better than nothing. Sure. But the other thing is, when you have 30-pound shield, well, your adrenaline's going, it'll probably feel like nothing. But I think the option of having the both different sizes is probably the best option. So that's part of the big cost for the equipment. I think I covered the box in the back, some of the mounting hardware for the long rifles in the front. And if you ever go through, or if you've ever seen our patrol vehicles, I encourage you to look at them. There's just so many things that it is a requirement to have in there. And trust me, when I'm looking at this and it's adding up, I'm like, gosh, how did this happen? But almost every one of those things, or not almost, every one of those things is required in modern day law enforcement. I will touch on briefly too, when the upfitting, this isn't an added cost. You just have a bunch of different options that are all relatively the same. For us, what I want to do for our vehicles is have a light bar on top, the more traditional light bar. Grass Valley and some agencies are going with what's called slick top, where they don't have a light bar on top. I don't like that as much. Sometimes I think it's, again, going more for that slick and intimidating factor. I like
I
the
want to
light
see you
bar.
come up behind me.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I want too. And I want as much visibility for our, I want when the car goes by to everybody immediately know that's a cop car. Not to go, is that a cop car? I think it is. I want them to see the light bar. I want them to see us driving up and down the road. So,
I like that.
right now we have 2 vehicles, I believe, that are slick topped. One we bought from Grass Valley recently and one we had outfitted here. But that's another thing that I think is important, to have all our existing or future vehicles have the fully equipped light bar on top. And with that, I think I covered everything. Is there any questions on what I'm presenting here? So it did have a total cost which will not exceed $172,160. The good news is, the very good news on this, is it is budgeted in the current budget.
Excellent, excellent. So first, I guess we should look for public comment in the room. Not seeing any, let's go online, and then we can bring it back to the table.
Fur-covered police vehicles?
Sorry, no, I already nodded now. I like thumbs up, I like the lights.
We have, no one still in attendance
Okay.
on Zoom.
No one's still in it. Well, we've lost a few. It sounds like Gary has a comment.
Well, I just have a question on the purchasing. I'm surprised to see it go through enterprise. I've run a couple of fleets. All the purchasing went through the state with the comparative bidding process where the state gives you the price and then you go to your local dealer and say, can you match the price? So I guess I was just kind of curious about how we end up with enterprise.
So Enterprise is not something that we're necessarily going to end up with indefinitely, but I started working with them as they're becoming more of the mainstream fleet provider for your state bids up and down the state. So Enterprise is the biggest company, I don't know how they got into the fleet game, but for example, most of our neighbors for Grass Valley, I believe Truckee, are all buying through Enterprise now. Their big push that I'm not bringing to you tonight, that I might bring back to you at a later date, is more of a lease program through them, but I'm not interested in that right now. They are the biggest, so they have the biggest inventory. I included Enterprise as the bid, but we can definitely look for outside bids, but right now, the vehicle inventory is so limited. Enterprise is kind of our best option to go with, and it is the state bid. It is still the state bid process.
Okay, well, I was just curious, because with the thing that made a difference in the cities I was in was that the local dealers have the option to meet or beat the price.
And I have not reached out to them, but I will definitely do that because I agree with you that we should. So I'll reach out and see if they have any in stock and are willing to meet the price.
About stock, and also, I just wanted to comment that the outfitting is, the cost of the outfitting is not out of line, and I know that. I'm just curious about how come the sergeants get the heavier shields than the front line people. Is this
The more effective, heavier
I
shields.
was curious, is this like a hierarchy thing? You get a better shield if you're a sergeant?
You know, the logic is the sergeant will most likely be on scene, so I'm most likely going to have one sergeant. They work a shift where they cover two different shifts, and they work more to the peak hours. So my sergeants right now cover between, they're working 4 to 4, so I might have to reevaluate it because they're working less likely when we have a school shooting.
I was just curious.
However, I will say when I was a patrol officer, and most of my line officers are going to want the lighter shield, even though it's not as durable. Those heavy shields, you hold it for a minute and you're like, okay, let me trade up.
You might be giving the heavier shields to the biggest person.
And that's probably my two sergeants as well.
Yeah, they are bigger.
I have a question. Can you tell for folks who might be wondering, why does every officer need a vehicle, their own vehicle, and particularly at a time when we're moving towards more foot patrol?
So you have to have, we're heavily pushing right now foot patrol or the bike patrol, which I love the bike patrol. But the bike patrol and the foot patrol are being done on overtime predominantly. And the reason is I have to have a vehicle for response time. One thing that's critically important to me for this organization in particular, and that I'm really watching, is response time. And we're going to increase response time even from what it already was. Response time is so critical for a vehicle. Not only is it response time, and what I mean by that is when they get the call, they have to have a vehicle immediately for them. We don't want them running back to the station, then jumping into a vehicle and then driving across town to wherever this call is. Response time, when you call a cop and you're waiting even a minute and a half, I guarantee if you really need an officer, that feels like they'll swear I waited 10 minutes. And we could pull it and say, you waited a minute and a half, and it'll be in their mind, I waited 10 minutes. So response time is critical, and vehicles are so necessary for that. Secondary upon that, if you do get to the call and say you have to effect an arrest, it's great when you arrest the guy and you're on a bike and you go, okay, well, now where does he go? I can't drape him across the handlebars. I need to put him in a vehicle. I need to get him to where he needs to go from this point. Also, there is so much equipment that an officer carries in that vehicle. So if you're going to a code blue, which is somebody that's unresponsive or medical alert or medical emergency, if they need to render CPR, they have their AMU bag, which is in their vehicle. And there's just a list of things that any of the equipment that they're not carrying on their person, which is a lot of equipment, it is all in their patrol vehicle. Every officer carries a bag with them that is full of, if they go to a domestic violence response call, there's so many different forms of paperwork that they have to provide for that domestic violence. That's not carried on their person, that's all in the vehicle. If they need an emergency restraining order, that's in the vehicle. So vehicles are critical for every officer to have. The foot patrol and the bike patrol are a key element to what we're looking for in this community, but that's on top of the vehicles, not a replacement of, if that makes sense. And then the other thing is what we do have here is each officer is a nice incentive, is the officers do have take-home cars, but that's also the upfront cost of that can be a big obstacle, but we overcome that. We now have moved past the upfront cost of that, and we're actually seeing the reward. A lot of the vehicles in our fleet are very old. They would not survive at an agency that uses the vehicle every day. So we're able to actually get a lot more years out of these vehicles than we would at an agency that, I mean, the simple math is, if you're using an agency that doesn't have take-home vehicles, they're not doubling, they're quadrupling the mileage and the hours on the vehicle because it's being used every single shift, 4 shifts of the week, where our current vehicles are only being used for 1 shift. So you technically get about 4 times the amount of life out of that vehicle. And I don't know that we could transition to another because, as we talked about earlier in the night, parking is just so critical. I don't know where we'd store a fleet. So it's actually a great benefit for us that the officers are able to get the vehicles away from the yard. But I think that answered your questions, hopefully. We
Absolutely,
talked a
yep.
lot.
Thank you for walking us through that.
Does anybody else at the table have any other questions or comments for the chief?
I just, one other comment I want to make was, if you decide to want black and white, and that's up to you, just don't get black, just, that's all.
Agreed.
I can assure you we will not have black.
But if you want to go to black and white, the fact is, it will take you time to migrate your fleet into that. So you're going to have the mismatch for a while,
A
but
long
if that's
time.
what you want, do it and get started, because in the end, that's what you get, but it does take time. In fact, it could take years.
It would take a very long time, yeah, and I'm aware of that. Probably 10 years.
All right.
We're fixing our numbers now, so we're getting at more accurate numbers, and we're taking that step so that years from now, we know we're operating off of better numbers, and you could do the same with paint jobs on cars. I think it's a good idea to have cop cars look like cop cars. I like the black and white, and so you know what you're dealing with. If you need an officer, you know that's an officer, that sort of thing. And I think giving people the better shields is good incentive to try for promotions. You know, I will live a longer life if I really work hard at this job. I think that's
You
beautiful.
get a better shield.
And
But you got to work out.
the timing of this is perfect actually because we're asking for the cost for the more expensive, heavier shield, and we are actually currently doing range. We did it today, and we're doing it again next week, and I'm going to discuss it with the officers and see what their preference is to some degree. So we're making a lot of factors, but for this purpose, I'm asking for, the cost here is for the more expensive, heavier shield. We might actually go with the lighter shield.
And those shields will not be used for crowd control, will they?
Absolutely not. So a crowd control shield, which we do not have currently, are very different. They're the clear plastic shields. These shields are not to be used for crowd control in any measure of that word. Will I say you'll never see them? It's hard to put absolutes in law enforcement, but that's not the intended purpose of these shields.
So if you're breaching a room, the heavier shields go first, right?
In my experience, we actually used, again, it just goes to mobility so much. So if, a lot of times when I was a little bit younger, I carried the shield, and then I preferred the lighter one, and it was kind of the handler, just because it is unbearably heavy. And now, if I really thought this might go bad, then I did grab the heavier shield. And the heavier shield is actually designed different, so it has little slots, so somebody can stand directly behind you, almost like a Roman shield. No, now as chief, I have somebody standing in front of me with the heavier shields.
Okay, so I'm going to look for a motion to approve the purchase of these vehicles. Can I get a motion? Can I get a?
I move that we vote to approve these vehicles.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Wow, okay. Well, I got a first by Adam, a second by Gary, and then do we need?
You did roll call and everything else, and I'll do it again if you'd like. Councilmember Cizi?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Councilmember Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Fernandez?
Yes.
And Mayor Fleming?
Yes.
Nadia in Espanol.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Really appreciate it. Okay, who's going? City Manager report first.
Real quick, the City Council Strategic Planning Workshop is next Wednesday, the 21st, 5 p.m. This week is your last week to fill out our surveys. Go to our website, bottom left-hand corner, there's a button that says Strategic Plan Survey. Constitution Day Parade, and duck race, and band concert, and reenactment, and a whole bunch of other things this weekend. Unfortunately, the mosquito fire is impacting a lot of people in El Dorado and Placer County. Some people lost their homes. I don't want to in any way minimize that loss, but it is also impactful here with the smoke, and the air quality has been very poor. We believe that we will get through it without having to cancel the event, but the triathlon happening at the same time, the We Celtic Festival last Saturday, football games at Nevada Union have all been canceled because of the smoke, so we're keeping a close eye on that. Met today, and we'll meet again Friday for a go, no-go. And then lastly, September 24th, for those that are interested, will be the report back to council as requested for Measure W. Some people refer to as the 9212 report on the legal and other findings related to the ballot measure. So for those people that might be calling the council or are watching at home wondering when that is, that'll be on our next council meeting 2 weeks from today.
Can I ask a question about that?
Of course.
It'll be at the council meeting, so there will be discussion.
Yeah, it'll be a business item, yes.
Great. Awesome. Did you hear that, folks? We will discuss it.
And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
But how did the Pictionary game go?
The police department might have crushed the Pictionary game today.
And it was like 12 of them to 4 of us. Oh, no. Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Less squabbling over the.
Okay, Lou, do you have anything to tell us about?
No, not in particular. We're going to have the next meeting of the Fire Safety Advisory Committee tomorrow.
Some folks might be happy to know, some folks might be not so happy to know that I'm staying on council. I found housing in Nevada City. And I moved this weekend. That's why I sound like this, because I moved in the smoke. Yeah, and then Gary and I are meeting tomorrow with the Transportation Commission as an introduction, and then we'll have our official meeting next week. And I believe that is all.
Okay, Aaron.
A couple things. First off, could be as well. I want to touch on the League of Cities. We're all attending the forums attending the League of Cities with Sean. A great time. We learned a lot. Great networking. Learned a lot about each other. It was, I think, an important event. And it really started, it's really important, I think, where we sit as a city to start to look outward and see what others are doing as we begin to think about how we need to do some modernization and stay current. So I think it's extremely valuable in that regard. And I thank the city manager for arranging for all that to take place. It seemed like a small thing, but it's actually a very big thing. But I really like this. After watching the street sweepers go down the middle of the street for some time, the last round that they made, they first sent out folks with leaf blowers who blew out of the curb into the middle of the street, and then the street sweeper came by, which is the way to do it, where it actually cleans the curbs, and it's very effective. I know it takes more work, but it was very well done, and I'm really pleased to pass that along to the Public Works folks. It was really good to see. I pulled up to my house and I said to my wife, "Well, you've been sweeping the curb again?" She goes, "No, the city did it." Or what? But it was really well done. And greatly appreciated. So, thanks for that.
Thank you, Gary.
You can have a little bit of my time if you want it.
Again, thank you.
In regard to the League of Cities, there were a couple things. We attended the fire safety one with the people from Paradise, which was the high point for me. So interesting and, enlightening. And they talked about, dealing with the actual fire itself in that moment, but also the recovery. That was the best use of my time down there, I think. I also saw an amazing one on homelessness from people who've had actual great results, and that was really worthwhile. And then there was one that I was really excited about. Was it rural retail? How to support your? It was Gary was there for a hot second. I was really excited. I was like, yeah, let's figure out how to better support our local businesses. And the whole thing was just about how to attract national franchises to your small town. It was like the example was how to get Dunkin' Donuts to your town. And Gary was like, this is obviously not for us. And I was like, yeah. But I had just the morbid curiosity being like, all these people really want Dunkin' Donuts. And if we got Dunkin' Donuts in this town, we'd be run out of town and our friends would never talk to us again. And it was fascinating. We're a special place.
I'm watching Adam stay there and watch this, and it's like somebody watching a train wreck.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, there's like, well, we actually banged and we got our Wendy's.
Yeah.
But it was also a commercial, a real commercial for the economic development. Wow. He was building all the connections and stuff.
How was the guy, the city manager from Clearlake? The tall guy?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Was he in,
Trying to remember.
is he got longer hair?
You had opinions on his haircut.
How was his presentation?
It's not how was his hair.
It was an interesting panel in that really the moderator was the guy who was doing business and he was selling himself and they would ask a question and ask him to reply. And they didn't do separate presentations.
Yeah, he didn't have a presentation of his own. But it was just a really great reminder of how specific a place we are.
Yeah, good point.
It was awesome.
I'm glad I didn't attend.
Hey, thanks again for that, Joe.
Abuso es mío.
Yeah, I thought it was a great time just to see people. You know, it was my second one, so I actually knew some people there. And I ran into Molly Legault and, you know, a few other people that I saw in the text with but didn't see. I want to just thank the city manager for being our scout leader. You know, he had us all wrangled and, you know, I mean, we wanted this. Yeah, it was very good. He kept us on point and, you know, told us where we needed to go, and it was definitely helpful. And it was nice to just be together and, you know, build some teamwork and all that stuff too. So, I don't have anything else I want to talk about right now because it's late and I'm tired.
Can I just one thing I forgot. We hosted last week, State Treasurer Fiona Ma had a wonderful day-long tour of Nevada City. Want to thank the Chamber of Commerce for participating in that. Want to thank the National Hotel for doing a tour, Sierra Commons for doing a tour, Shelley Covert and Ember with Chirp at the Ubaseo Gallery on Broad Street, and Cashin's Field folks for doing a tour, and Communal Cafe for hosting. Thank you. I feel like it's my acceptance speech, and I'm like, who am I forgetting?
The county CEO took us to the courthouse.
Wait, what? Right. And then also the merchants who came out. There were between 30 and 40 merchants that came out and participated in the listening session. It was really great. And if there are any merchants listening or watching this later, if you're interested in getting a list of the resources that Treasurer Ma offered, Stuart at the Chamber of Commerce has that list and can forward that to you via email. So please reach out.
Exciting.
Okay, thank you so much, Danielle. And for that, after that, I'm now looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second. All right, first by Danielle, second by Gary.
Approved.
We are adjourned. Sean?